channel, right channel, center.
VTuber 一問一答自己紹介
Yeah, and the tape's
それじゃあ
rolling.
行くよせーのお名前は
Katt Phloxworthy.
呼び方は
Just Cat is fine.
あなたは何系 VTuber?
Nerdy cat girl who features
誕
spaceflight.
生日は
May 4th.
年齢は
Older than Pneumatic.
性別は
Transgender
身
female.
長は
4'11".
出身は
Sacramento County.
チャームポイントは
Dialogue hair clip.
突然ですがモノマネどうぞ
Yeah, what's up, Dad?
活動場所は
Twitch, Twitter, YouTube.
はじめの挨拶
Thank you for joining me.
終わりの挨拶
Bye.
推しマークは
Not at present.
配信タグは
Cat-like feed.
ファンアートは
Cat pics.
ファンネームは
Cat's apprentices.
好きな色は
Iris Indigo.
好きなことは
Vintage computers and
得
video.
意なことは
Technology.
ここで一言愛の告白好
I love you.
きな食べ物は
Ethnic foods.
好きな飲み物は
Craft soda.
好きな漫画は
Pizza 10.
好きなアニメは
Planet.
好きなゲームは
Left 4 Dead 2.
好きな音楽は
Classic rock.
苦手なことは
Human stupidity.
尊敬するのは
Space fairy people.
叶えたい夢は
ISS crew
最後にみん
interview.
なに一言どう
Thanks
ぞ
so much for your support and a final status check.
Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
Go Katt Phlox.
You have permission to launch.
3, 2, 1. RD-180 ignition. Booster ignition and liftoff of Atlas V and Centaur. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me. Hi, Katt Phloxworthy here. This is going to be my first space flight in a while. Space flight stream in a while. Also, this is also my first stream that I'm going to be doing with this model. So, what I'm going to do is, first of all, we're going to be heading over, before we do so, first of all, just making sure everything is working right, because I did have a network related issue with the two voice meters and VB Audio's matrix on both machines, and I got that fixed, and it looks like it's working. Do you guys hear me all right? And hey, KF16 over on YouTube, how you doing? And in the meantime, we're getting ready to head over to, I believe, if memory serves, Space Launch Complex 41 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station over in Cape Canaveral, Florida, where right now there is an Atlas 551 vehicle on the launch pad with a load of Kuiper satellites for Amazon, getting ready to launch their, getting ready to start building up their constellation of satellites, which basically would go in competition with existing operators, SpaceX for Starlink and Eutelsat for OneWeb. Hey, listen, not too bad, and yourself? Good to see you here. Let me give you a real quick shout out. Hang on. We're about to join them up real quick. They're showing T-minus 4. Let's see. They're saying. I think they're getting ready to do the. They're saying T-minus 4 minutes and something. I don't know what that in relation to that. Anyway. Gears of War 3 was what you will be or have streamed recently. So anyway, let's go ahead and head over to the pad real quick here. And oops, hit the wrong button. My bad. There's the pad on. There's the vehicle on the pad. Let me unmute real quick because I need to make another slight change. There we go. What you were looking down was from the top of the vehicle down at one side, which has 3. Looks like they're at T-minus 4 minutes and holding, getting ready for the...
I'm working a couple of issues. I recommend extending the hold at T-minus 4 minutes. We're going to delay dropping fuel and recommend delaying spacecraft batteries to install. So our new teaser will be ported.
concur.
Okay,
and, LD concurs.
Roger.
they are going to lengthen the hold. Normally, they hold up until like about T minus 4 minutes, and at which point, just before then, what they'll do is they'll do a go-no-go poll to make sure all systems are go. All systems and personnel, ground and range are go for launch. And as you can see, let's see what they have to say. They're the SRBs and the straddling the RD-180 in the middle.
Prop 1, LC, net 1.
Go for Prop 1.
I want to make sure you're aware we're going to delay start of fuel fill sequence.
Affirmative.
But normally what happens is right around T minus 4 minutes, they will, they usually they build a hold into the countdown, like I said, just to make sure all systems are good to go. Not to mention at this point, the main issue that is keeping the launch from happening right now is the weather. Most notably, all the cloud cover that you see there. Launches have always interested me since I was a kid. Yeah, me too. The first one I actually got to see televised was was STS-1, the first launch of Columbia, and that's one of two, and only two, of the entire STS program that used painted external tanks, and they found that they saved a lot. They saved quite a bit of weight by not painting them. Yes, indeed. R.I.P. STS-107 crew.
And as
that
you just
happened
heard from our launch conductor on Channel 1, we are standing by for a new T0. We'll bring you more information as soon as we have it.
And again, a lot of this has to do with the weather. There are 3 of the SRBs. I believe they are Northrop Grumman GEM 63 SRMs. And there are 2 on the other side. It's a 551 mission, which designates as was said in the chat over on Twitch during the pre-show.
Right now, we're taking a live look at the Atlas V rocket on the launch pad. As the countdown continues, our team is taking the final steps in preparation for liftoff. The first stage, also known as the rocket's booster stage, is a large tank on the bottom that is actually 2 tanks, one filled with the RP-1 fuel and the other with the liquid oxygen. And the liquid oxygen is the super cold cryogenic propellant that turns the tank's exterior from bronze to that frosty white. And of course, with the rocket engine, we have the fuel and the oxidizer pumped super fast down in the engine. They mix in the combustion chamber, they're pushed out of the nozzle at super high speeds, and that's what gives the rocket its thrust.
That was perfect. That was a 30-second overview of rocket science right there. Atlas is also equipped with the Centaur upper stage, which drives the payload during the second phase of flight to its final orbital destination in space. The payload fairing, or PLF as we refer to it, completes the rocket and provides this aerodynamic shape necessary for the climb to space. On the upper stage in the PLF, we'll see the logos for Amazon, Atlas, and ULA, as well as the American flag. Let's learn more about how ULA builds the Atlas V rocket.
Well, let's see how this goes.
Engineered in Centennial, Colorado, ULA's Atlas V rocket is built in Decatur, Alabama, and launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Once the rocket is manufactured, it travels to Cape Canaveral on ULA's cargo ship, known as Rocket Ship. After arriving in Florida, ULA's launch operations team begins assembling the rocket. Stacking begins with lifting the 107-foot Atlas booster, powered by an RD-180 engine, onto the mobile launch platform. For Amazon missions, 5 solid rocket boosters are attached to the sides of the first stage for additional thrust at liftoff. ULA's ultra-thin stainless steel Centaur upper stage, powered by an RL-10 engine, is then lifted into position. Lastly, the payload fairing, containing the spacecraft, is lifted and mated to the Atlas V rocket. Once assembled, the countdown begins with moving the rocket from the vertical integration facility to the launch pad. The trip to the pad is about 1/3 of a mile. Throughout the 20-minute trip, a payload van leads the move, providing communication with the spacecraft, followed by the ground van providing support to the rocket. The mobile launch platform supplies air conditioning, electrical, and propellant lines to the rocket. Track mobiles at the rear power the convoy, which includes an environmental control system providing air conditioning to the payload and rocket, as well as a backup generator. Atlas arrives at the pad for fueling and other final preparations, and once fueled, weighs nearly 1.3 million pounds and stands 205 feet tall.
Today's mission is just the start of ULA launches to deliver Amazon's Kuiper satellites to orbit. Let's learn more about Project Kuiper and what they've been doing to prepare for offering internet connectivity from space.
It all starts with a countdown. But a countdown to what exactly? 6 years ago, we took on a journey to build the most advanced and the most modern communication system in the world.
There are almost 3 billion people that don't have high-speed connectivity.
Imagine if they had the ability to be connected just like you and I do, what they could do, what contributions they could make.
This mission is ambitious for a truly worthy cause. It's going to impact communities that cannot be reached with fiber traditional communications. The solution really has to be from space.
You can think of Project Kuiper as a three-part system: the satellite constellation, the customer terminal, and just as critically, the ground network and software that ultimately deliver connectivity. We have set out to design the most advanced satellite network ever built, and we have created the whole thing in-house at Amazon. You need just about every technology area to contribute to build the satellite: the propulsion system, the solar arrays, the silicon, the phased array antennas, the optical inter-satellite links.
The team has to be innovative, agile, resilient as we're moving very, very fast. Building, testing, developing in-house has been an extraordinary ingredient.
When we first proposed Project Kuiper internally, one of the first questions was, can you produce an affordable customer terminal? We knew that was going to be the linchpin of our system.
The big breakthrough for us was combining transmit and receive antennas into a single aperture. No one had ever done this in the Ka band. That let us pack a ton of performance into a really compact, really low-cost design. We're going to build tens of millions of these antennas, and we are well on our way. The design is done. We're now in the factory manufacturing it.
We talk about the satellites and constellation, but Kuiper is a satellite constellation being operated as a network across hundreds of ground gateway terminals.
Our ground network is spread out all over the world, and each site connects back to AWS. We already have a bunch of these sites installed everywhere from Australia to Germany, and more of them are coming online every month.
There's a big difference between launching 2 satellites and launching 3,000 satellites.
The past couple of years, my team has really been focused on how to achieve scale. Our own dedicated payload processing facility gives us the ability to control our own destiny. We've got the capacity to integrate up to 5 satellites per day and launch 3 simultaneous campaigns. Heavy lift rockets have higher performance, so we can take more satellites to orbit on any given launch. All of our heavy lift launch partners have had a successful first flight, so that's been a pretty exciting thing for us to see because we made those investments years in advance.
All of the pieces have come together to support that first launch, and the next one, and the one after that. It might not all go perfectly, but we have an incredible commitment to this project and an incredible team committed to its mission. All roads lead here, a countdown to launch. And with more than 80 missions planned, we're just getting started.
Not to mention, once New Glenn comes into its own, they can launch even more at a given time. And let's see, let's catch up a little bit on chat here. But the shuttle was operated. Hang on. Whoops, sorry. Fun fact is that painting the ETs would have saved Columbia by preventing the foam and ice from falling off the tank and hitting the tiles. I don't know. That would Coulda, shoulda,
This
woulda
is
is a
Atlas Mission
very
Control. We are
interesting
currently
one.
in a hold due to weather, and we are awaiting a new T0.
It says, but the shuttle was operating past its expected lifetime when the and was supposed to have replaced long before the last flight in 2011. Yeah, that's they were already talking about getting something else, but and that was long before even SpaceX started to do anything. And something sadly common now, things operating past their expected lifetime because the successor wasn't funded. At that point, actually, really, the successor wasn't even conceived of yet, really, when you get right down to it. Not to mention, also, speaking of things past their design lifetime, Atlantis's pressure vessels were very, 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 very closely monitored because the vendor who made them no longer existed, so they had to be very careful of how much LHE was put into those things in order to pressurize the ohms and RCS engines. So yeah, that was a tough one. At least one more, at least the more places. Morton Thiokol, I don't know. I'd actually have to see which list of vendors they used for the shuttle, but I know Morton Thiokol did make the SRBs, which culminated in a day of infamy, January 28th, 1986, with the destruction of Challenger. And catch up a little bit, and of course, you said earlier, it's amazing how much power is needed to break through Earth's gravity. Yep. Oh, yes, definitely. On Atlas Centaur, the SRBs get it off the pad quicker because it's a pretty heavy load. I don't know how many satellites are on this particular launch, but typically on for example, a Starlink launch, they'll have anywhere between 45 and 58 satellites on board. Sometimes they'll even have ride shares on there, and of course in this case it's a different setup. We have
LCRC,
the first.
that one.
Let's see what they got.
RC.
We've coordinated the new T023:40 with the range, and it's been approved.
Roger.
So that translates to about 4:40 p.m. here Pacific, 7:40 p.m. Eastern. Some more remote places in the U.S. will be able to get internet. Yep, definitely. Actually, I don't know if it's CDE. That was more a Sun thing than anything else. This is more like a OSF motif implemented by Silicon Graphics. And anyway, back to the Atlas Centaur. This particular mission is 551. Let's see what they got.
Ready to provide net brief on the CLH2 tank pressure soft flow that was reported.
Roger. LD net 1.
LD.
Proceed, AC.
Yeah, LC. So the team noticed an increase in tank pressure in the CLH2 tank. That was simultaneous with the SRV cycle test going on. The pressure got a little higher than we intended it to, but the Flumon test took the appropriate action to bring the tank back down. We have no concerns for vehicle health or proceeding with today's operation. We'll document on the DR to address corrective action in the future and recommend proceeding.
LC concurs. LD.
Apparently there was a little bit of. Apparently it was a little bit of a pressure buildup in. LH2 is in the second stage, the Centaur stage.
Roger.
LH2 is liquid hydrogen, which is the fuel for the Centaur stage, which uses a bipropellant of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, sometimes called hydrolox, especially if you're watching Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. This uses what is called the gas expander cycle. Basically what happens is as the fuel goes through cooling lines in the nozzle, they go from a cryogenic liquid to a gas, which then is fed into the turbopump, which then continues to draw more fuel and oxidizer from the tanks into the combustion chamber.
And we just received a new T0 of 7:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Our hold is extended due to weather, so let's get an update from Brian Sizik.
Thanks, guys. Yes, and currently we are no-go for the cumulus cloud rule, and we're also monitoring the winds at the ground level as well. So here's why we're no-go for the cumulus cloud rule. Notice these showers that are off the coast here. Now, they're not directly over the launch pad, which is about right here, but because they're fairly tall, they could hold a charge. And actually, if they get to a certain level, the -20 Celsius level, it's a 10 nautical mile standoff from the launch pad and the flight path. So that's likely what we're dealing with here. These are pretty tall showers. So the launch weather team is monitoring this. We're watching the motion here. So notice that they are pushing to the south and maybe a little bit to the east. So if we could get these to push a little bit farther to the east and get outside of that 10 nautical mile range, we could potentially clear that cumulus cloud rule. Now, we're also watching some more showers that are developing farther to the north. Now, again, they look like they're trying to push a little bit farther to the east. But again, the team will be monitoring these other showers that are starting to come in from the north. And then if we switch to winds, this is the other weather factor that we're monitoring here tonight. So notice the red numbers here. So that is the gusts right along these our weather towers here at the Cape and KSC. We're monitoring the wind. So notice that the gusts are in the low to mid 30s. We're seeing some peaks miles per hour. So again, we're going to need some of those gusts to come down in addition to the showers pushing a little bit farther away from the launch pad. So those are the two factors. It does look like it is improving marginally as we go towards the end of the window. So again, the POV currently 80% at the opening of the window, but as we push later, it does look like it improves a little bit. So that's what the team's going to be watching. Again, as I mentioned, if we can find a gap in the weather and if we can find some good conditions, the launch weather team will give that go call. So guys, back to you.
Thanks, Brian. As you heard, we're going to take a pause in our live broadcast so we can work closer towards our T0. Hopefully, the weather will clear up in this time being, and we'll see you shortly.
Okay, and as I'd mentioned, going back to the rocket itself, the first stage is the first stage has a bipropellant of RP1, rocket propellant 1, or refined petroleum 1. It's a long chain hydrocarbon. I believe it's duodecane, which is 12 carbons and 26 hydrogens. And the thing about, and I think the lower half is actually the fuel, and the upper half, like they were talking about earlier, that is where the liquid oxygen tank is, and that is cooled cryogenically as well as kept under pressure, and that keeps it in liquid form. And of course, during this time, what'll happen is that some of that oxygen will boil off. I believe those tanks are in fact insulated on that one, on the Atlas V booster. And at the base, this is a 551 configuration. You see 3 of them on one side, and there will be 2 on the other. Like I said, these, I believe, are Northrop Grumman GEM 63 SRMs, solid rocket motors, and they give it a bit of an extra kick to get the vehicle off the pad, and they burn for roughly 1.5 to 2 minutes, after which point they are jettisoned. And the center, and of course the center core uses an RD-180. It looks like it has 2 nozzles. It may look like it has 2 engines. The Vulcan does have 2 engines. This one only has 1 in the booster. It uses a single RD-180 with 2 combustion chambers. It uses 1 turbopump to feed both, and it is made by NPO Energomash, and it's a Russian company, and we are not getting any more of those. In fact, also, not only are there a limited number of RD-180s left, there's also a law in effect which basically says anything that has America's national security interests in mind, they cannot be flown aboard foreign-powered rockets, i.e. these guys. And the last one I think that flew actually last year, after the law, albeit after the law took effect, probably because it may have been scrubbed so many times up until that point. But they could still be flown for either space exploration, human spaceflight, as in the case with Boeing CST-100 Starliner, which apparently is going to be doing a test flight later on this year, uncrewed, after some of the corrections have been made. And, of course, commercial flights like this one. Anyway, when the vehicle launches, like I said, first the SRBs will burn for roughly 1.5 to 2.5 minutes, at which point they'll be jettisoned, relying on the RD-180 to kick it up even further. And then, after about 4 minutes into the mission, they will separate stages, and then the RL-10 will light. And as KF16 was mentioning over on YouTube, here the Centaur burn for orbital insertion will be for like 18 minutes on this flight. That must be fun. Yeah, that sounds about right. Mainly because you have to remember this does not use a gas generator type setup or pre-burner like they did in, say, for example, the RS-25, which powered the space shuttle and, of course, is powering the SLS first stage. 3 of them on the space shuttle and 4 on the on SLS's first stage. It's also worth noting that the SLS uses a modified version of the space shuttle's SRBs on each side. Originally Morton Thiokol, then later on ATK, then orbital ATK, and nowadays Northrop Grumman. So, and of course, like I was saying earlier, those liquefied gases do boil off when they go in there. Even when the tank is insulated, much like this one is, they'll still boil off. And of course, in the case of liquid oxygen, they can be boiled in. They can be released into the atmosphere. As for liquid hydrogen, I think we saw in one of the spots there was a tower that had a flame on it, which I believe was probably the liquid hydrogen being burned off.
This is RLM-11.
Let's see what they got.
Oh, RLM. The 4 Delta P values for LH2 are now back within band. Roger. You have a code to clear them. Active.
So it sounds like liquid hydrogen pressures are back to where they should be. And of course, during the course of any kind of boil off, they will replace any of that. They will replenish the supply of any of the boiled off cryogenics. In this case, it's liquid oxygen in both stage and liquid hydrogen in the Centaur stage. RP1, which of course is essentially just a highly refined form of kerosene, is a liquid at room temperature. And SpaceX typically chills it down to make it even more dense so you can pack more into there before. I don't know if they chill it just above the point before it starts to become sort of a gel, or if they do it a little bit higher than that. Fun fact, North American Aviation was spun off the American divisions of Fokker. I see.
LC, this is RLM-11.
Go ahead.
Alarms have been acknowledged. Roger.
One of those alarms had to do with the LH2 overpressure that they were talking about earlier. And of course, what they'll do is they're continuing to monitor the weather situation over at the Cape to see how things go prior to launch. Anyway, like I was saying earlier, the 551 rather, that refers to the 5. The first 5 is the number of refers to how long the payload fairing is. In this case, it is a 5-meter fairing. The second digit is the number of SRBs attached to the base unit. And the last digit, the 1, indicates the number of RL-10s on the Centaur stage. Okay, so I think the video said, okay. But anyway, yeah. Another good example would be the when Boeing CST-100 Starliner lifted off. That was an N22 configuration. N meaning no fairing, The vehicle itself is aerodynamic. The only appliance they did put on was an aeroskirt below the service module portion of the vehicle, and 2 SRBs, and there are 2 RL-10s at the base of the Centaur. And when they launch that one, they launch it into a profile that is suborbital. The reason they do it suborbital is in case something goes wrong and they need to bring the craft back, they can rely on a basically a free return, basically where all they have to do is jettison the service module, turn the command module around, and then of course enter the atmosphere accordingly. If need be, they may need to do any kind of thruster firings just to adjust where the vehicle will ultimately land. That's another thing, is that had the Boeing CST-100 Starliner actually had astronauts in it, it would have been the first American capsule, not the first American spacecraft of any kind. That distinction belongs to the space shuttle. It would be the first American capsule to land on land with crew in it. And of course, the other 2 that do that would be Soyuz. Nowadays are Soyuz from Russia, Roscosmos, and of course the Chinese Shenzhou. They land on land, although apparently one of the Soyuz craft a bunch of years ago actually did splash down, and which is a less than ideal situation for that spacecraft. And all that superstructure that's immediately to the left of the tower, that has all the necessary equipment in order to do crewed flights. And speaking of the stuff for crewed flights, Slick 40, Space Launch Complex 40, at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, now is equipped to do crewed flights. In fact, I believe Cruise 7 launched with that. Okay, no. The NAA absorbed North American division of Fokker. NAA is notable for making the second stage of Saturn V and the Space Shuttle Orbiter. And of course, North American Aviation ended up merging with Rockwell. And in fact, that happened in... Amy Shira Title actually had a video about that, saying... in fact, there was a rather interesting thing, is that Northrop Grumman had billed North American Rockwell for the towing. And of course, also the X-15. Yes, the North American Aviation did the X-15, which is a rocket plane, which is normally launched from a B-52 mothership, and then has liquid-fueled rockets that would then propel it to speeds of in excess of Mach 5, basically hypersonic speeds. And it would go up, and I think one of them actually inadvertently went to essentially hit the... I don't know if any of them hit the Kármán line, which is 100 kilometers. America considered 50 miles above the surface of the planet to be the barrier to space, but ultimately the international organization, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head, ultimately decided that 100 miles would be the Kármán line, or the border to space. It did go into space, and it was Neil Armstrong that did that. Not surprising. I also read some other stuff about Neil Armstrong being traumatized about what happened to the Apollo 1 crew, which of course composed of Virgil Grissom, also known as Gus Grissom, Ed. See what they got.
Go ahead, Phil. Too.
First step 660. Centaur LH2 is at 99.8% at 23:10 Zulu.
Roger.
Which is the current time, or just after we're just after that time. Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. That sounds about right. I think 2 reached the Kármán line. Yeah, okay. But yeah, that's. But of course, none of them went to orbital space, which was the ultimate goal, which would ultimately happen first with in America, of course, with John Glenn aboard Friendship 7, which is the first crewed Mercury Atlas vehicle. In fact, Buzz Aldrin's mother's maiden name was was Moon. Ah, interesting. Yeah, I'm just making sure I catch everything. But it's strange to look at all the major American solid rocket motors to see that they're basically all made by Northrop Grumman now. Yeah, that's because most of them actually came from what used to be. I think what happened was Morton Thiokol ended up becoming ATK, and of course Orbital Sciences acquired ATK, making them Orbital ATK. And of course after that, Northrop Grumman acquired them probably, I believe, in 2017, I think it was. 2017, and then of course now Northrop Grumman does that. And of course they now have one thing that I would love dearly to see more than anything else in the world, the last remaining sole airworthy Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. That is a beautiful airplane. I wish I could have flown aboard one of them because apparently lots of pilots and passengers loved them. But unfortunately, the development of the Rolls-Royce RB211, the only power plant designated to power the L-1011 TriStar, was very much over budget, and on top of that, to the point where it almost bankrupted Rolls-Royce. So they ended up going into government conservatorship, as it were. So it was nationalized for a time. So we're about just a little under half an hour away from the T0, and they're still watching the weather, mainly winds. I'm not sure if wind shear is a potential issue, but of course cloud cover over the corridor being the other concern. As one of the let's see, I wonder what's going to happen with it now, seeing as it's been quite a while since Pegasus last launched. Yeah, that's a good question, honestly. Mainly because, like I said, that is the sole remaining flying airworthy example of the TriStar. The RB211, though, did ultimately go on to power a lot of other airplanes, most notably the Boeing 757, the Boeing 747. I don't know if it ever powered the Boeing 767, but of course its original the plane was that it originally powered, of course, was the Lockheed TriStar. And of course, that was also Lockheed's last ever civilian airplane, although nowadays Lockheed Martin just no, I think it was Boom Supersonic that did the recent supersonic test where they hit Mach 1 and didn't generate any notable sonic booms on the ground. Either Boom Supersonic or Lockheed Martin. So that is a potential big thing to come, where we can actually see this will be the first supersonic passenger aircraft since Concorde. See what we got.
Go Fuel 2.
First up 700, Centaur LH2 has been above 99.8% for 5 minutes.
Roger. PNA2, LC.
Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead, LC.
Perform Centaur LH2 SUV cycle test.
Roger.
I wonder if there's a problem with the LH2 tanking on the Centaur stage. Right, Lockheed Martin is working on a separate supersonic low boom test aircraft, but the thing from the recent test was Boom Supersonic. But yeah, I knew it was one of them. I couldn't remember whether it was Boom or Lockheed Martin. But of course, there have only been two. I mean, there are two other. I think Lockheed actually was considering making an SST plane, and of course, Boeing with the Boeing 2707 would have been one of America's ones. Funny they're named boom when they want something to not make a boom. Yeah. Find that a little bit interesting, if not maybe amusing. But yeah, the only other SSTs that have actually flown right now, of course, were Concorde. And before it, making its debut about a month before Concorde ever had its first flight, was the Tupolev Tu-114. And it very infamously crashed at the French air show, the Paris air show. Basically, it looks like I think it actually stalled out. And apparently, flying aboard that was not fun. Probably about as fun as the slightly similar numbered the Tu-114, also by Tupolev, which is based on the Tupolev Tu-95 long-range strategic bomber, which has the distinction of being probably the single fastest.
LCP2.
See what we got.
Go PNA2. Centaur Cryo SEV cycle test is complete.
Roger. OSLC.
This is what?
Perform data transfer to backup CCLS.
Roger.
So, what I was basically saying is that the Tu-95, I'll get to that in a moment. The Tu-95 is the fastest flying propeller-driven aircraft in operation right now. I think the one of all time would have been the Tu-114. And going into that, basically the way these planes are driven, they're driven with very high-powered turboprop engines, which spin two massive four-bladed contra-rotating propellers, whose tips reach pretty close to, if not just a little bit past, the speed of sound. And from what I understand, many a Tu-95 crew person out there apparently have experienced hearing loss due to that. And speaking of supersonic blade tips, the XF-84H Thunder Screech, excuse me, that has the distinction of being probably the loudest airplane ever built. Basically, that thing was running at the same speed the whole time. They just changed the blade pitch in order to accelerate or decelerate, or when it's on the ground to possibly use it as braking. And the one recording I did hear of it sounded weird, to say the least. And but yeah, basically that was driven by two gearboxed together turboprop engines. And from what I understand, the rotational forces were so...
20 minutes.
minus 20 minutes, okay. Which means the T-minus mark...
Atlas
LO2 remains at flight level.
Roger.
LC locks 2.
Go.
Centaur LO2 at flight level.
Roger.
LC
Yeah, they're
Field
changed.
Go field 2.
Centaur LH2 at flight level.
Roger.
Okay, it sounds like all cryogenics are at flight level pressures. We're just waiting on the new T0, or at the very least, the go-no-go poll
This is LD
about...
on 1.
Go LD.
Please coordinate a new T0 of 00:03.
Roger. 0003.
Good copy. Thank you.
ALC. LC.
Go ahead.
Please set the clock for a new T0 0003.
Looks like it's going to be at
RCLC.
8 p.m. Eastern,
RC1.
5 p.m. Pacific.
Please coordinate with the range a new T0 of 0003.
Roger, welcome.
So we're now about now the new T0 is about an hour.
LC at 1.
LD.
Yeah, LD, our launch vehicle issues are resolved. We are just currently red on winds at this time.
Thank you, LC.
But right now, it's the offshore winds that are having issues right now. So all the vehicle issues are okay right now.
Go.
Countdown clock has been set for a new T0 of 03000.
Roger. All right, for the team, for our new T0, L count is L minus 41 minutes. And SCI LC, channel 1.
Do I recall the SRB X test for the Ares 1?
SCI.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah, just want to make sure where the T0 change.
Yep, they copied that.
Roger.
That's an interesting one, to say the least. Yeah, apparently what happened is that one of the things that happened is that I guess one of the parts of the vehicle struck each other during the course of separation. Weather's already looking a lot better. Yeah. What they're mainly looking at right now is stuff a little bit downrange from there. Mainly because what's going on is that apparently, that, like they were saying, is that cumulus clouds can sometimes be very tall, especially if they become cumulonimbus clouds, because that's where a lot of that's where thunder clouds, that's where lightning comes from, is cumulonimbus clouds, and also I believe some cumulus clouds. And one of the things they're trying to avoid at all possible costs is hitting the vehicle with lightning. And of course, as I mentioned during the course of the pre-show, Apollo 12 was struck not once but twice during its ascent. At least the...
And as you just heard, we do have a new T0 of 8:03 p.m. Eastern Time. We will remain in a hold
8:03 p.m.
weather and resume the show as soon as possible when we are closer to launch.
So wow, the side of that vehicle looks kind of frosty, right where the right where that camera's looking down. And those are three of the SRBs connected to the vehicle. I wonder if they actually pack the grain in a way such that
RC channel 1. Go RC. The range has approved our new T0 of 00:03 Zulu.
Roger.
Anyway, like I was saying, I wonder if they account for the fact that there are 2 SRBs on one side and 3 on the other, to make sure that they set the grain up such that the propellant grain, which has usually like something like aluminum or something else for the fuel, and then ammonium perchlorate as the oxidizer. It made the moon just fine, so it's all good. No, it wasn't good for the first few moments because someone had the smarts to remember, and on top of that, had the presence of mind not just at one point just to look at the device, look at the switches on the console, but actually remember and tell the guy, switch SCE to aux, because they were without power. They could not have completed the mission at all. They would have had to separate and land and splash down had they not had that bit of advice. Once that switch was flipped, then everything worked. I forget what the SCE stood for, but basically it went to a backup power source. And that says nothing about Apollo, and then of course Apollo 13, that was as close to an in-space death situation. Yeah, tell that to the waiting for the day where we have to say, Houston, we've got a waifu, or something like that. Okay. So anyway, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Boeing that came up with the, I'm not sure if it was Boeing that came up with the Atlas V. And then, of course, Lockheed Martin was the other one. I forget which was which, and ultimately both ended up combining to become United Launch Alliance. That was because of some anomalies as far as how things were developed or how things were funded. I forget the exact thing, but they basically were forced to become one organization. And if you look at the base, just to the right, at the base of the right, you'll see a sort of a slant area, and then sort of a ramp on the right. That is, I believe, part of the flame, what essentially forms the flame trench, and right at the outlet of that at the base of the launch platform. There are a bunch of there's a bunch of water things that will deluge water into that area just to reduce the amount of acoustic energy that ends up hitting the vehicle on the pad. And the interesting thing also, another interesting thing is it would never have worked had they actually gone through with it, and that was Sea Dragon. Would have been entirely pressure fed. There's just no way it would have worked. And on top of that, the engine, it was one engine, and it was so big they could not launch it on land because of the sheer amount of acoustic energy that thing would be putting out. And Hayes Gray Art has a really good video that really puts it in perspective. Fun fact, there was an idea for Saturn V that's staged like Atlas I with an outer ring of engines that separated for a sustainer engine to push it to orbit, sort of a stage and a half design for the Saturn V-B. I think I remember you mentioned that once. I think I remember hearing that about that one once. And of course, Atlas I, which is of course is what put Friendship 7. Freedom 7 was a Redstone and a suborbital flight. And that one actually basically launched with 3 engines, one on the core and 2 outer strap-on engines, which fed from the core's fuel and oxidizer stores, and would drop off partway up during the flight, and then the center sustainer would keep going, much like how the Soyuz first stage works. Well, actually, first and second stage, they're both ignited on the ground, and then about 2 minutes into the flight, the outer 4 peel out and forming the legendary Korolev Cross. And basically, and of course, the most recent one the most recent failure of that on a crewed mission, of course, was Soyuz TM. No. I'm trying to remember the damned mission name. MS-10. Basically, one of the strap-ons got stuck, mainly because the part that had the ball that would go into a socket that's on the center core got bent during transit. There was also a Saturn IV which was a cut-down Saturn V. Just the first stage had 4 engines and no stage 2. So instead of stage 4 was directly mounted to the first stage. Ah, gotcha. Back, one of the things I think I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to hit while we wait. Let's see. They're saying 8:03. It is now. We're about 33 minutes away from launch. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to switch over here, and I'm going to change. I'm going to change videos real quick here, because give you an idea of how big these things really are. What's the difference between a strap-on in terms of a booster and a normal booster? Define quote-unquote normal booster. Because right now, these boosters are SRBs. They're solid rocket boosters, as opposed to, say the, for example, the outer common core boosters of, say, a Delta IV Heavy or a Falcon Heavy, which are basically the first stage, but with only aerodynamic fairings at the top, and on top of that, the ability to connect to the center core. And of course, there's and in this case, and then of course in the case of the space shuttle and SLS, they use SRBs for the strap-on boosters. The normal booster just is in the center. I'm assuming the by booster you mean the center one. Basically, the center boosters is with the spacecraft for most of its flight. Or the Soyuz rocket. And of course, the Soyuz rocket uses strap-ons for that one, and it actually draws, I think, like the engines on the Atlas A. Oh, allow. Sorry about that. I meant booster versus strap-on booster. Okay, yeah. If you meant the booster, like say for example the Atlas V, that is the Atlas V itself is considered a booster. The GEM 63 SRMs are considered strap-ons because they will peel out at a portion of the way into the Atlas V's flight. So let me go grab this one video here. Oh, cool. I actually got it right. Let's see. Sea Dragon. And it would have been fully reused, too. Reusable, too, rather. Yeah, and I'm going to do the pull one because that gives you... Because the boats that are tugging it out to sea give you really a... what's the opinion on the Delta III? Oh, that's the one. I think that one had a lot of launches. And I think that was the one between the Delta II and the Delta IV. They didn't have that many. But I think that was also the one... that was the class that had the one GPS satellite launch that where one of the strap-ons had a crack that grew very quickly to the point where they actually had to destroy the vehicle during ascent. And oh, that was the video on that one is spectacular. Anyway, let me do something real quick here. No, that's the wrong OBS Studio instance because that's not on that computer. It's not on this computer. It's on another one. Delta II with a couple of Delta IV uppers, with a Delta IV upper stage. Oh, something like the one that had like the DCSS, huh? The Delta cryogenic second stage. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna do this real quick. Let's see if this works. Hang on. Copy. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. Okay, that's fine, I guess. I'll just do this instead. Hang on a sec here. Okay, I'm about to play this back. Stand by. Whoops. There's your idea of scale of how big this thing is. Just a few tugboats taking that out. The top part is essentially like the command service module of the Apollo vehicle. Sorry about that, I hit the wrong button again. Boeing made Delta 4, Lockheed made Atlas 5. They were forced to merge and launch because of just some corporate espionage stuff. Oh, how nice. And of course, what they then do is get it to the point where they take all the floats off, and then they go down even, I think it goes down even further. I feel this warrants an aircraft carrier for scale. Oh yeah. And there we go. Engine lights. And just watch. I think there was another one I should probably show as well. And like I said, this was designed to be very simple. Basically, the idea is to use as few moving parts as possible. It was going to be pressure fed, relying on kerosene and liquid oxygen. That would never have worked, because to date, no fully pressure-fed launch system has ever made it to orbit. The only ones that ever did were a couple of Astra ones, and even then, that was a very hit or miss thing, as well as SpaceX's Falcon 1, which used the Kestrel engine on the second stage. This thing would have, we're talking 80 million pounds of thrust. Wasn't there one in that Cold War space show? There goes, actually, there goes the, basically what happens is that the engine drops off, and pedals open up to become the nozzle for the second stage. And in a ring with a big, huge bunch of, essentially what amounts to parachute silk opens up, and that's what allows you to reuse the first stage engine. But then again, RP-1, considering that it's using a long chain hydrocarbon, would suffer from issues like polymerization. For all mankind has a Sea Dragon launch, I think. I don't know if I saw that one or not. Let me go ahead and head back to the chatting solo window again. Let me go back into Hayes Gray Art again. This one's a short, which shows, I think, just the launch portion of it itself. And of course, there's the big, huge ass flame, just lighting up the ocean like that. But I remember seeing another one where the water was practically up to the service command service module. And of course, yeah, that thing would never have flown. And another thing that I liked about Hayes Gray Art is they do some pretty good videos of absolutely fake, I mean thought of but never really implemented. Let's see, I'm trying to Let me go and I need to go into the into OBS Studio and start it over again. With that attitude, it wouldn't. Yeah. Let me get. I also need to go get the. Make sure I get the URL for. Make sure I have it. Make sure I have the URL right. Okay. Let's go ahead and get back to this. I'm trying to basically start the there we go. Oh, here's a good view of the if I can get there quickly enough. Here's a good view of the hydrogen burn-off. You're 20 minutes away from launch. If you look in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that flame down there. That is I believe that's actually the normal
spec. LD on 1.
Go LD.
Oh, hang on.
Please coordinate a new T0 of
damn it.
0 colon
Oh,
2.
No. That thing was actually correct. That band I saw is actually correct.
Roger, 0,
So yeah,
0,
that
2, 2, Zulu.
Good copy.
ALC,
Go ahead.
please set the clock for a new T0, 0, 0, 2, 2, Zulu.
Roger.
Oh, they're going even later into the
one.
launch window.
Please coordinate with the range, new T0, 0, 0, 2, 2, Zulu.
Roger, Wilco.
But anyway, if you look in, like I said, if you look in the lower left, that red flame, I believe that is the characteristic color of a hydrogen flame. And of course, that's gaseous hydrogen as it's boiling off from the Centaur stage.
Oh.
Countdown clock has been set for new T0 of 0022 Zulu.
Roger. All right, for the team, we're at L minus 37 minutes.
And they have 38 minutes left in the launch window for today. There is a distinct possibility they may actually scrub. It all depends on how things are looking. And it sounds like they still, while they were...
RC, that one.
RC.
Roger, the new T0, 00, colon 22 has been coordinated approved by the range.
Roger.
Yeah, they were originally experiencing equipment issues earlier, notably the liquid hydrogen tank aboard the Centaur was having pressurization issues. They saw it overpressure a little bit, and then they managed to get it back down to flight pressure. So right now, all cryogenics are at the appropriate flight pressure ahead of launch. The only issue they're tracking right now is the range, most notably the weather. I love that one. It says, I feel like this warrants aircraft carrier for scale. Yeah, that thing was gargantuan. That thing would have been an absolute behemoth. But the other thing, though, is another thing that was noted is that the even though that we say the F1s are huge, and those things needed some engineering solutions because when they were actually building them at full scale, before they actually went with the design they finalized and actually flew, the issue was the vehicle, the the engines kept shaking themselves apart. That's because hot spots would develop, and basically there was flame instability from the in the nozzle. So what they had to do, they basically took a page from Wernher von Braun's original design for the V2, which basically has several different injection points, several distinct injection points. And what they did is they took the design of the the F1 rather, sorry, and they basically put baffles in there. They put baffles on the side, basically to make make that one larger area into smaller zones. So you have several different flame fronts that actually merge into one, so no hot spots really have a chance to develop. Or if there are hot spots, they're located in very highly localized areas within each of those areas, as opposed to the entire engine. And in fact, they went so far as to try and destabilize the flame by setting off explosives in the plume when they were testing it on the test stand. And sure enough, everything stabilized almost immediately after that. They did destabilize the flame, but very, very, very briefly. I thought hydrogen flames were nearly invisible in normal light. That's when they are fully oxidized, basically using the standard ratio that's used, and I believe it's fuel-rich when it goes into the, for example, the RS-25. That is almost completely invisible. But what we're talking as opposed to hyperoxidized versus ambient air oxidized. Basically, that flame that you're seeing as basically the 20 some odd % of oxygen that's in the atmosphere, or however much it is. I forget the exact ratio of oxygen versus all the other gas, and it's mostly, remember, the air is our air is anywhere between 75 and 80% nitrogen. So 90%, 75 to 80% N2. So yeah, you are absolutely right. Though it is a hydrogen flame when it's fully oxidized, when it's properly oxidized with enough to actually generate thrust. Those flames are damn near invisible. And in fact, on the ground, you see just a very, 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 very pale blue that's coming out of the nozzle of the RS-25s when they're lit. And otherwise, you see a nice big white flame front on the inside of the engine as you see the engines light up. And in fact, one of the things Nile Red actually did a short comparing burning atmospheric oxidized air as well as basically taking a balloon, filling it with hydrogen gas, and then setting a flame under it to set fire to it. It gives a characteristic red flame when it blows, but it's a very weak flame. When you take out about 20% of the volume of it and replace it with oxygen, not only does it go much faster, you see almost no flame. Uh-oh, something happened. Oh, I don't know what happened, but apparently something happened on my switch locally. But everything seems to have resolved itself very quickly. Also, the Delta Form is cooled by ablation by part of the nozzle, if I recall correctly. And that's why it's flame turns orange. Yes, that is absolutely correct. I believe the interior and exterior are ablatively cooled. Basically, there's a coating on both sides of the nozzle, on the inside and outside, which burns away, much like how an ablative heat shield burns away on a crewed spacecraft. But just for grins, let me see if I can find that video to give you an idea of how that difference is between, let's see, shorts. Oh, it's maybe just Nile Red. Sure, it's, let's see, hydrogen, oxygen, balloon. I'm going to grab this real quick here. Copy. I'm going to go to chatting for a minute, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to load up that video into my browser source. Actually, I'm going to try first in the YouTube source to see if it'll let me play it. Oh! Okay, it will let me do it then. Okay, stand by.
Hydrogen gas and
Damn
lit
it.
it on fire, and it made a nice little pop. What I've been really wanting to do, though, is to try it with this, which should be a lot more exciting. This is because, instead of just being pure hydrogen, I've replaced a third of it with oxygen. With this new mixture,
about a third, I'm sorry.
all of the hydrogen should be able to react almost instantly, and it's honestly kind of scary. But anyway, I guess now all I need to do is light it on fire.
Boom!
And I'm pretty sure it shook the entire building.
So yeah, it goes. Basically, what they were basically talking about, what's basically being said is that it went boom. Basically, they were at stoichiometric ratios to each other. Basically, where both substances are consumed by the entire reaction. But normally, the engines are run a bit on the fuel-rich side, and many Russian engines are run on the oxidizer-rich side. Basically to make sure that the engine stays cool. Because if you ran it at the full stoichiometric ratio, then it would run way hot. Let me get the... Make sure I get the right one again. Let's see if I can find this. Russian engines, oxidizer rich. Yeah, I thought their main combustion chambers were usually fuel rich, even with oxidizer rich pre-burners. My understanding is I don't know. That's a good question. That's right. I think it may actually be. I know that the pre-burners definitely are oxidizer rich because, basically, the gas, it works best if you use a gas on a pre-burner as opposed to, say, the fuel. Because in this case, they're using T1, which is essentially like RP1, which itself is also a highly refined form of kerosene. Let's see. Let me get this back up here because they're talking about the weather again. Oops, hang on. Okay, they are showing the right one. Let me go ahead and make sure.
The west, closer to the pad. So that's why we haven't been able to clear this cumulus cloud rule. Again, those clouds could have electrification that could potentially trigger a lightning strike. So that's why this rule exists, to prevent a rocket-triggered lightning strike. And we're also monitoring the winds as well. So it's the cumulus cloud rule and elevated winds. So you can see we are maybe seeing a little bit of a drop down in some of these wind speeds. We are still seeing a few gusts in the low 30s, but a lot now getting into the 20s. So maybe trending down a little bit in the winds, but we're going to need that trend to continue. So we're still watching those showers just off the coast, and we need these winds to come down as well. So guys, we'll be watching, and again, if we can get the weather to clear, the launch weather team will find that opportunity and call the go call. Back to you.
Thanks, Brian. Here we've got a live shot of Jetty Beach. So we have a lot of beachgoers out there sitting on the sands and taking their time to hopefully view a launch later this evening.
Yeah, and even though we would have loved to launch at the opening of the window, you know, as the sun goes down, it does make for some really spectacular launches, especially with those 5 SRBs. If we launch tonight, these folks are going to think the sun is coming up. It's going to be so bright.
Definitely. Well, now we're taking a live look at the mighty Atlas V on the pad. It's really crazy to think about that all 27 Kuiper satellites are tucked in nicely into that PLF.
Okay, 27 devices are going up.
It's not just any PLF. It's the largest one we fly today. It's 77 feet tall. Like you said, all 27 Kuipers in there. And then again, with the 5 SRBs, this really is the largest Atlas configuration that we currently have in our fleet today. And so it's going to be really rocking when we launch. It's going to shake the whole building as it flies, as it lifts off.
Definitely. We're all maxed out on SRBs. You can have a configuration change of either 1 to 5. And each of these SRBs are adding 375,000 pounds of thrust. So when you combine that with the main engine, you get almost 2.7 million pounds at liftoff.
And we just saw the SRBs there. Now
and of course, you see with the one with the writing on, that's the RD-180.
2 engine bells of the RD-180, as well as those 5 SRB nozzles just hanging out right under our mobile launch platform. And a lot of smoke and fire going down into that flame trench as soon as all that ignites at T0.
Oh, definitely. You'll hear us say we have ignition, and then the whole frame will light up. You'll see all that fire and smoke come out, and then hopefully we'll see a grand Atlas liftoff into the horizon.
I hope we get to see pictures from there at ignition
again,
time.
We talked about the liquid oxygen, the cryogenic fuel, both on the booster as well as the upper stage being both liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And so those are cryogenic. They're, you know, negative 200 to negative 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So at those temperatures, it boils here in Florida at room temperature. It's 70 so outside. And so you're seeing that boil off. So we are constantly replenishing those propellants. They're constantly boiling off, and to keep the tanks full, we're just adding more and more throughout the hold here to make sure that when we lift off, we are fully fueled and ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Objectively harder to make metal things that contain oxidizer-rich as opposed to fuel-rich combustion.
LC.
What they have to say.
Countdown clock has
We've just heard from our mission control that we now have a new T0.
Another one.
The new T0 is 8:39 Eastern Time.
8:39, so it's about 40 minutes from now. Objectively harder to make metal things that contain oxidizer-rich as opposed to fuel-rich combustion, and there isn't really a reason to expand beyond that effort on a combustion chamber. I guess that's true. Yeah, you're right though. The pre-burner is in fact oxidizer-rich on, say, the RD-180, as well as, of course, its relatives, the RD-170, which is its progenitor, which is a 4-chambered engine, which is used on the Zenit booster, either by itself or along with the center
just a
core
reminder, we do have a
of the
2-hour
Energia
window tonight,
vehicle.
So we do have window remaining, even with the T0 being rescheduled due to the weather delay. Looking at a live look at the Launch Control Center here in Cape Canaveral. Engineers all continuing to intently watch their data throughout the hold and monitor the vehicle as we proceed through the weather delay.
Whereas with kerosene
There's nothing like being
pre-burners,
on console, Caleb. You really get this excitement of sitting there, all of the tension and all of the hard work that's really cultivated to this moment here. You know, everyone's focused. We're making sure all of our systems are in line when we do get that new T0 due to weather. And it's never quite like, you know, the excitement of launch day. It's unmatched, I tell you.
Absolutely. It's just like you said, everybody's worked so hard to get to this point. You know, sometimes you gotta just wait for things out of your control, like the weather, which is what we're doing tonight. But everybody still very focused and ready to go if that weather window opens up tonight.
And even if we do have a 2-hour window, you know, at the beginning of the window, we would have gotten that launch right around the sunset time, but night launches are also equally spectacular. You really do get to light up the sky. You feel the whole building shaking. You really hear that power of those SRBs with those main engines, the RD-180s, and you get a good liftoff out of Earth's atmosphere. So night launches are equally as cool. You've got the bright, shiny, you know, star coming through, and nothing like an Atlas V launch.
Yeah. And we're now looking at the Mission Directors Center. So we have our Amazon customer as well as our Space Force customer in there monitoring the launch. And this is the management team who is making all the decisions on what our new T-Zeros are, making sure that we're proceeding through the count, and doing all of the final polls and giving that final go up till launch, as well as our Engineering Support Center here in the ASOC.
Whereas kerosene pre-burners running those oxidizer, which prevents hydrocarbon polymerization that would otherwise clog injectors for staged combustion. Oh yeah, that's the reason why. That's the reason why they went with oxidizer rich, because you do not want to polymerize anything in that particular area, because if that happens there, you're all sorts of screwed, because when that thing stops working, your engine stops working. Period. You fall down, go boom.
LC, RC, channel 1. Go RC. The range is approved our new T0 at 00:39 ULA. Roger.
In the case of the RS-25, that one's actually hydrogen, it's actually fuel rich in terms of staged combustion. Basically doing more, sending more fuel into the sole turbo pump in there. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. There are two turbo pumps. One, mainly because of, as Tim Dodd puts it, hydrogen is so very undense, because you actually have to use multiple stages of pumps in order to get it to the right pressure, in order to feed into the
this is Atlas Mission Control at T-4 minutes and holding. ULA's
into the
new Vulcan rocket
combustion
was
chamber.
recently certified by the U.S. Space Force to launch critical missions for the U.S. government. Let's take a look back at the Vulcan certification flights.
Oh. It's Vulcan Centaur, powered by two BE-4s, which is a Methalox engine using liquid methane and liquid oxygen.
Status check. Proceed with terminal count. Vulcan systems propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulics.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LNG. Go. LO2.
Go.
Water.
Go.
Centaur systems propulsion.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2. Go. LH2.
Go.
ASGAS. Go. Op safety manager. Go. ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle systems command.
Go.
Anomaly chief. Go. Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
So the BE-4 actually flew. There's the BE-4 ignition, SRB ignition, and liftoff.
And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight to the moon and beyond.
And this one uses two BE-4s, while the first stage of New Glenn uses 7 of them. Whereas with kerosene-free burners, also happens to be the reason why jet fuel is rarely used in rockets. Jet fuel specifications permits excessive concentrations of alkanes for rocket engine purposes, since alkanes polymerize easily. Yeah, good point. I've actually seen, I think, a Korean rocket engine uses Jet A for its fuel.
Both SRBs. We have Vulcan Centaur separation.
And there's the
ignition, full thrust. Both engines are up and running. Cut off.
Yep. And there's the flame trench. The RD-180 is igniting on this one. No, that's not the RD-180. Sorry, that was the BE-4.
The United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, carrying ULA's legacy of reliability, orbital accuracy,
So they basically got Space Force certification for basically stuff for the military.
Vehicle is looking good right down the range track. Everything looking up. The we're performing as expected. All temperatures and pressure good. Vehicle has begun its pitch and draw program.
So now we have 21 minutes left in the window.
Has been indicated.
Springy, springy, springy. Love how it's bathed in all that light and all those vapors are just dancing in that light. It's beautiful. Oh, alkenes, I'm sorry. Permit excessive concentrations of alkenes. I needed to look at your message a little bit closer, and yeah, alkenes are like for example, the simplest is ethene, which is 2 carbon atoms with a double covalent bond, and each of them having 2 hydrogen atoms attached at each end. And the next carbon would have, I believe, 1 bond, or another. No, wait a minute, another double covalent bond. I'm not sure if it's a single bond or a double covalent bond. I'd have to see, for example, what the next one up, which I believe would be propene. That sounds so wrong, but it's the next alkene in the line. Yeah, there are 3 different ones. I don't understand why those words are so similar. I guess we have to deal with it myself, especially since I'm a chemistry student. Oh yeah, because yes, there are 3 different types of hydrocarbons: alkanes, which is like methane, ethane, propane, butane, pentane, etc. There's alkenes, which involve double covalent bonds, and then there's alkynes, ALKYNES. The simplest of which being called
This is Atlas
ethine.
Mission Control. We have plenty of exciting launches coming up here in 2025, but 2024 had a memorable year for ULA.
Let's see
Along
what
with
they've
2
got.
Vulcan launches, we launched humans for the first time with the first crewed flight test. We celebrated our 100th national security launch with the USSF
aromatic
51 mission
hydrocarbons.
and said goodbye to the Delta vehicle with our final Delta IV heavy liftoff carrying NROL 70. Let's take a look back at these very exciting missions.
Vulcan certification 1.
Go Centaur. Go Peregrine.
And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight.
Delta IV Heavy NRL. Yep, there's the. There are those orange flames.
Closing Delta's 6-decade legacy of excellence in space.
And there go the side-mounted CCBs.
And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American
Whoa!
heroes.
All that ejecta from the plane trench.
Liftoff of USSF 51 for the United States Space Force on ULA's 100th National Security Mission.
I saw a wild concept which was AB.
Go Vulcan. Go Centaur. Go Cirque.
Liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, carrying ULA's legacy of reliability, orbital accuracy, and high energy performance.
And bearing jettison has been indicated.
Delta IV with 2 side boosters and SRBs on the side boosters. Oh, that would have been interesting to see. Although one thing would have been interesting to see, and also Atlas could have also flown like in a heavy configuration, much like much like, say, Delta IV Heavy or Falcon Heavy, but it's never flown with that configuration and never will. It also bears mentioning that Orion was actually flown aboard a Delta IV Heavy on its very first flight. And of course, with the way it ignites, it would never have been human certified. And of course, one thing that the Chinese and the Russians do all the time, and I think to another degree to a different degree the Japanese do, and that is they put rockets on they put boosters on all four corners of the center core. In the case of the Japanese, it's primarily the H2 and the H3. They use 4 small SRBs at each corner of the rocket, whereas Angara uses like a common core booster on all 4 corners at the base of the first stage. And I believe each is powered by an RD-191.
Atlas rockets have launched many of the world's vital space assets. Let's take a look at the impressive legacy of the Atlas family of rockets.
Imagine a New Glenn Heavy. That'd be interesting.
For the maiden flight of the Atlas V rocket with a Hotbird 6 spacecraft on board.
As the inaugural flight of the Atlas V lifted off on August 21st, 2002, it carried with it the dreams and aspirations of thousands of rocket pioneers who had laid the foundation that made it possible. Atlas V continues the Atlas legacy of innovation and accomplishment that has been vital to our nation for more than half a century. Named after the mighty giant of Greek mythology who carried the world on his shoulders, Atlas was conceived as a weapon and a deterrent, but evolved into a system that pushed the envelope with trailblazing innovation and steadfast reliability. At the request of the Air Force, Charlie Bossert and his San Diego-based engineering team began work on a demanding set of requirements to design an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of delivering a 1,500-pound warhead to a target 5,500 miles away. Their answer, which became known as Atlas, was the top national priority in 1955 as the race with the Soviets engulfed the country. On June 11, 1957, the first Atlas flight lifted off from Space Launch Complex 14 in Cape Canaveral, Florida. The flight ended 38 seconds later, but Bossert's team had taken the first step and proven the structural integrity of their innovative pressure-stabilized steel tank. Complete success for the Air Force and Bossert's team would come just 5 months later, on December 17, 1957.
Go, honey, keep going, baby.
Though the Soviets had beaten the U.S. to space with the launch of Sputnik in October 1957, President Eisenhower would counter a year later when Atlas 10B delivered his holiday message of peace from orbit 180 miles above Earth. Known as Project SCORE, the orbiting Atlas booster became the world's first communication satellite.
This is the President of the United States speaking. Through the marvels of scientific advance, my voice is coming to you from a satellite circling in outer space. Attention all personnel, report to the blockhouse immediately. Countdown will begin.
On September 9, 1959, Atlas 12D became America's first operational ICBM, following launch from California's Vandenberg Air Force Base. In all, 350 Atlas ICBMs were built and stood on operational alert through 1965. The surplus boosters were refurbished and used by the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and NASA. The last refurbished booster was launched in 1995. By the early 1960s, the Atlas booster had made the transition from missile to space launch vehicle, and 1962 proved to be a pivotal year. Riding atop an Atlas booster in Project Mercury's Friendship 7 capsule, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth on February 20th, 1962. Three additional Mercury flights, carrying astronauts Scott Carpenter, Wally Schirra, and Gordon Cooper, set the stage for the Gemini flights and the Apollo missions to the moon. Later that year, Atlas scored another first when Atlas 179D, equipped with an Agena upper stage, lifted off from Space Launch Complex 12 at Cape Canaveral. Its payload, NASA's Mariner 2, became the first successful interplanetary spacecraft. 1962 also marked the debut of the Centaur upper stage, the first to harness the power of liquid hydrogen. The Centaur upper stage, to this day, remains a hallmark of the Atlas system. Together, with its Agena and Centaur upper stages, the Atlas booster went on to play a significant role in America's exploration of the solar system, launching virtually every exploration mission in the 1960s and 1970s.
It was the first spacecraft that was launched from Earth that had enough energy to escape the entire solar system.
During the late 1970s and 1980s, Atlas continued to play important roles in the development of our nation's space program. In addition to building our national security presence in space, converted Atlas boosters also launched the Air Force's Navstar demonstration satellites, leading to the navigation system known today as GPS. In the late 1980s, General Dynamics saw an opportunity to bring commercial payloads back to expendable launch vehicles, and on July 25, 1990, AC-69, the first Atlas I, ushered in a new commercial era for Atlas. The commercial era brought 8 new Atlas configurations over a 14-year span, each carrying an operational payload. The commercial program has enabled breakthroughs in communications, meteorology, broadcast technology, navigation, and national security. In 1995, development of the Atlas III vehicle began. In a bold move, the Atlas booster engine system was replaced with the powerful RD-180, which generates 860,000 pounds of thrust and has throttle capability resulting in a smoother and more efficient ride. Making its debut from Space Launch Complex 36 on May 24, 2000, the Atlas III provided a substantial performance improvement over the Atlas IIAS. Reliability was increased by reducing the number of engines from 8 to 2 and the elimination of 5 staging events, as well as more than 10,000 parts.
This is Atlas Mission Control on T-minus.
In 1998, the Atlas team embarked on a development project for the United States Air Force that would forever change the Atlas vehicle.
And the RD-180 engine roars to life and liftoff with a maiden flight of the Lockheed Martin Atlas V rocket with a Hot Bird 6 spacecraft on board for Eutelsat in Paris, France.
For more than 40 years, Atlas vehicles had relied on the pressure-stabilized steel tank developed by Charlie Bossert and his team. In a departure from conventional thinking, the Atlas V development replaced the tank with a structurally stable common core booster. In addition to vehicle modifications, the team took a new approach to processing and launch. Atlas V processing is done vertically, and the mobile service tower has been replaced by a mobile launch platform, which carries the entire assembled vehicle to the launch pad, ready to fuel and launch. The Atlas V is expanded to multiple payload fairing and solid rocket booster configurations, as well as re-establishing a launch capability from the West Coast at Vandenberg Air Force Base. The Atlas vehicle has a long legacy of accomplishment. This record of success, which is nearly unparalleled in the launch industry, is built on the lessons handed down from more than 60 years of Atlas experience. It is also a credit to the dedication and persistence of the Atlas team and their passion for mission success, one launch at a time.
Zulu.
Roger. 0059 Zulu.
Oh, not another one.
ALC, LC.
Go ahead.
Please set the clock for a new T0 of 0059 Zulu.
Roger.
We're at the very end of the launch.
Go for RC.
Please coordinate with the range new T0 of 0059 Zulu.
Roger. Inward.
Let me catch up with chat. Sorry, I was kept quiet throughout. Also, do you think a New Shepard with a second stage could be working? Would be a working small sat launcher? Maybe.
Countdown clock has been set for New T0 of 0059 Zulu.
Roger. All right, the team clock is counting L minus 37, 7 minutes.
But yeah, I don't see why it couldn't be made. I just, it's just a matter of whether Blue Origin sees a point in doing that or not. Let's see. H2A
LC
final
has
flight.
Go.
Yeah, we've run into a slight issue where we've lost connection with the VNC on the laptop. It appears that the server is still running on the desktop in the lower PEB. There's been no interruption of ASGAS scanning. We're going to go through some steps such as closing out, restarting the VNC, or switching networks to see if we can get that connection back.
All right, yeah, and so are we getting data?
We are still getting data, yes.
Roger that. Okay, report to me when you're complete with your investigation.
Copy.
Okay. H2A final flight should be happening soon. But then again, it's been happening soon like for months now. Okay. Do you happen to know what kind of, what's supposed to be flying aboard it? You know, on top of that, it's so bizarre that they have to go through a bunch of letters and they decide that they were actually going to start using Roman numerals when they reached 1.
Range has approved our new T0 of 00:59.
Roger.
And departure from conventional thinking, as in they replaced an unconventional balloon tank with a conventional tank. Yeah, I've seen pictures of one of the Atlas boosters on the pad. Oh, I could say something very, very, very crass, but I'm not going to. Basically, where it loses fluid pressure in there. Final H2A payload is a GOSAT GW, some JAXA Earth's observation satellite. Oh, okay. Another note about the 5-meter fairing as opposed to the 4-meter fairing. The 4-meter fairing encapsulates only the payload, and the 5-meter fairing encapsulates the payload and the Centaur, which basically requires 2 different types of staging.
As you heard a moment ago, we do have a new T0 of 8:59 Eastern. We've pushed to the end of the window to see if we can get that weather to open up for us. So let's go get another check from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik.
Thanks, guys. And we still have not seen a great trend, but the best chance we have to get this weather to clear is at the end of the window. So that's why the launch team, they've been in communication with the launch weather team that is on console right now, and they are obviously monitoring the situation very closely. But again, here is what we've been dealing with all night, really. We have this convergent band of showers, that north to south oriented band that's moving. Kind of the whole line is pushing a little bit to the south. Now, we were hoping it would push farther off to the east, but notice it's progressed a little bit closer to the pad. But there's actually another way that we can clear this cumulus cloud rule, and that's if the tops of these showers get lower and the showers begin to dissipate. So the 2 ways, they could either push farther away from the pad, or they could weaken, where if the tops get low enough, that standoff distance actually gets smaller and smaller. So in other words, they can be farther away from the pad, or excuse me, they can get closer to the pad, and if the showers are weaker, then we don't have to be concerned about them. So those are the 2 ways that we could clear the cumulus cloud rule. We're also monitoring the winds as well, and as we take a live look at some of the winds we're seeing, notice we're still seeing winds in the upper 20s to low 30s miles per hour. These are gusts at the surface. The launch pad is right around here, so we're also monitoring winds up a few hundred feet as well. So again, the 2 things we need to clear that the launch weather team is going to be monitoring up until the wire here at our last T0 in the window, the cumulus cloud rule and the winds. Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, basically, when they encapsulate the entire Centaur stage, the different staging methods basically comes when if you have a 4-meter fairing, you can actually jettison the first stage while still having the payload fairing still attached. Whereas this
is
if
Atlas
you
Mission Control with T-minus 4 minutes and holding. Following liftoff, viewers watching the launch from Florida and points north and east might be able to see the Atlas V in flight. Let's get a closer look at the visibility map. Check it out at ULA Launch on social media.
Basically, what happens is that, like I said, with a 4-meter fairing, they can jettison Atlas while the fairing is still attached, and then attach it after they've ignited the Centaur. If they use the 5-meter fairing, they have to jettison the fairing first. They have to be past the Kármán line to do that, or at least very close to it on the inner side of it. They have to jettison the payload fairing first, then do BECO booster engine cutoff.
We continue to be at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. ULA also launches Vulcan rockets here in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Let's take a look around.
They do BECO, staging, and then ignition of the RL-10 on the Centaur.
System. In addition to critical national security, science, weather, commercial, and human space missions, ULA has a long-standing industry reputation for reliability and orbit accuracy. At our launch site in Cape Canaveral, Florida, the story begins with ULA's Atlas and Vulcan rockets arriving on the RS rocket ship. Rocket ship is a specially designed cargo ship used to transport rockets from ULA's more than 2 million square foot production campus in Decatur, Alabama. Once rocket ship arrives at Port Canaveral, the team offloads and transports the rocket to the pad. Launch site processing begins with Launch Vehicle on Stand, or LVOS. The 107-foot Atlas V boosters and 109-foot Vulcan boosters are transported and hoisted into a vertical position using a crane. Atlas is lifted onto the mobile launch platform, while Vulcan is lifted onto the Vulcan launch platform. With the boosters in place on the launch platforms, solid rocket boosters are added next, followed by stacking of the inner stage adapter and Centaur's second stage. Meanwhile, the ULA team works simultaneously to help the customer encapsulate their payload into the rocket's payload fairing. The encapsulated payload fairing is the final piece to be mated to the rocket. With the rocket stack complete, the final launch preps begin. Launch countdowns begin with moving the launch platform from the VIV to the pad. Weighing in at about 2 million pounds, the launch platform supports the rocket and contains air conditioning, electrical, and commodities, while the undercarriages bear the weight of the launch platform and rocket. Leading the move are vans providing communication and support to the spacecraft and rocket. Trackmobiles at the rear power the convoy, which also includes an environmental control system providing air conditioning to the payload and rocket, as well as a backup generator. On launch day, more than 24 engineers and managers are polled for system status and readiness to proceed.
Status check to proceed with terminal count.
This is the final status check before launch of all Atlas and Vulcan vehicle systems, ground systems, the spacecraft, and the U.S. Space Force Eastern Range.
Umbilicals. Go. ECS.
The vehicle
Go.
system readiness
Redline
poll
loader.
includes electrical
Go.
systems,
Flawless.
hydraulics,
Go.
pneumatics,
Top safety.
propulsion systems,
Go.
flight control, and propellants.
Go.
If the rocket is ready for flight and the weather is within the launch commit criteria, polling is completed and the team gives the go for launch.
Status check. Go Vulcan. Go Centaur. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Main engines and solid rocket boosters ignite to lift the rocket off the pad.
We have ignition.
Shortly after liftoff, the rocket begins a pitch over to attain the proper flight path, minimizing the dynamic pressure the vehicle experiences during flight. Within the first few minutes of flight, the vehicle reaches Mach 1, the speed of sound, followed by jettison of the solid rocket boosters. Minutes later, propellant levels deplete and the booster engine shuts down, followed by release of the booster stage. At various times in flight, depending on the mission, the vehicle jettisons its payload fairing. From there, the Centaur second stage carries the spacecraft towards its destination with planned engine starts and stops. Finally, Centaur releases the spacecraft in its target orbit to continue its journey.
Sorry about that. I had to take care of a few items here. I had to vacuum something a little bit. I spilled something. And on top of that, I was eating throughout. So basically what they're doing is they're using up as much of the launch window as they possibly can in the hopes they can actually get it. And apparently what they're trying to do is, even though those clouds are pretty close to
This is Atlas Mission Control, still holding at T-minus in 4 minutes. Due to maintenance issues on the Tennessee River, recently ULA's rocket ship needed a creative solution to transport our rockets from our manufacturing facility in Decatur, Alabama, all the way to Cape Canaveral. ULA engineers and technicians devised a plan to load the flight hardware onto the barge and then transfer it back to rocket ship downstream of the maintenance site. Let's take a look at this innovative process.
Have a look. This is going to be interesting. Like something out of looks like a poly bag something. There's a big barge there with a tugboat on it. No. Maybe that's the actual power portion of it of itself. Although, I don't know. And of course, there's the ULA rocket ship. And moving it straight off the barge into the ship like that, that's pretty cool. That's pretty much what, using up as much of the launch window as they can. That's exactly what, I mean, even with SpaceX's instantaneous launch windows, they'll go all the way up to T-minus, believe, like within the last last 10 seconds or so, and then scrub at that point if things don't cooperate weather-wise. So basically, they're using as much time as they possibly can, and if they say the top portions of those clouds can get into a position where it's not a problem during ascent, they could still launch, even with those clouds out there. It's also a matter of just the winds too, and those are probably even less predictable than the clouds. Now we got about 25 minutes left in the window. I think all those 4 spikes that surround the pad, I think those are like lightning rods.
This is Atlas Mission Control at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. We continue to be in a weather delay. ULA continues to make numerous changes to our factory and launch pads to prepare for an increased launch cadence. The team recently finished assembling a new Vulcan launch platform, or VLP-A, inside a new vertical integration facility, or VIF-A. The A in the acronyms designates Amazon, as these facilities will be used to support Amazon launches. VLP-A will travel along a newly renovated rail system between VIF-A and Space Launch Complex 41 to enable seamless transport of overlapping launch campaigns.
Oh, interesting. But then again, I don't know. Maybe they don't necessarily need a big launch stuff. I'm not sure if they're going to launch bunches of them at a time. I see that ULA came prepared for 2 hours of waiting. As I remember, Blue Origin certainly didn't when New Glenn was launching. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. That took a long time to launch. Yeah, that thing had pushback after pushback after pushback in terms of the launch time. It kept pushing the launch time back every time. I think it was all weather related on that one as well. At least in terms of the commentators going in circles.
We just received a weather briefing from Brian. Let's toss it over to him so we can hear some more details.
What they got? This is important.
Guys, yes, we did just get a weather briefing from the lead launch weather officer on this mission, my colleague Brian Belson. So what he briefed the launch team is we are watching this line of showers. We're getting new radar scans about every 5 minutes or so, and we're watching to see, are these cloud tops coming down at all? Also, are they remaining connected? Because if they're connected, you kind of have to treat the whole line as one and then just use the closest point to the pad. But if we can find some breaks in that line and the taller cloud tops aren't connected to the ones that are closest to the launch pad right here, then we could potentially get out of that violation as well. So we are still no-go for the cumulus cloud rule, but we're watching these new radar scans coming in to see if we could potentially clear it. So he gave an 80% probability of violation, so that's a 20% chance of go by the end of the window and our last T0. But again, there still is a little bit of hope, and that's what we're watching. We need these cloud tops to come down, or we need to see a little break in the connection here where we could potentially get out of the violation that way. So that's what the launch weather team is tracking. This is a minute-by-minute thing that we're monitoring. We're waiting for the new radar scans to come in, and that's what the team is watching, in addition to the winds as well. Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. We've been talking to you for a lot of the time tonight, so we always appreciate the weather updates and keeping all of our team here at the LCC and watching all informed. So we're still sitting here at T-minus 4 minutes and counting.
And one thing I just realized is that
to celebrate our new Vulcan rocket, we recently updated the lobby at ULA headquarters in Centennial, Colorado. Let's take a look.
One of the things I just realized is that my my logo is covering the countdown. Probably taking down the old Delta IV Heavy stuff. At least in terms of the commentators going in circles around because they're running out of stuff to say. Yeah, good point. Because yeah, that was an interesting thing that whole time. And by interesting, I mean like, man, they were just about out of stuff to say. Interesting how the Vulcan and Atlas V look pretty similar at the base, but they're different insofar as that one is one engine, and that's this one actually has one engine, and then the Vulcan has two. There are two combustion chambers on the RD-180, and of course, both are being fed by a single turbopump. And like I said, its ancestor, the RD-170, is a four-chambered version of that. Again, like I said earlier, it was used it's used at the base of the Zenit booster, which can be used by itself, or as strap-on boosters for the Energia vehicle, which has had two successful launches. One, the original one, which was of Polyus, which was a basically the Soviet Union's answer to the Strategic Defense Initiative, which went against what Gorbachev wanted to have happen, apparently. And fortunately for us, and unfortunately for the vehicle, is that when Polyus was released, it had to be, first of all, Polyus had to be mounted effectively backside first. Basically, its bottom is facing the direction of travel. And once detached from the core section of the vehicle,
LD on 1.
Stand by.
I am directing a launch scrub for today's operations. Please proceed with preparations for an extended turnaround with the next launch attempt under review.
Roger, LD. All right, team, direct operation 60, or excuse me.
There you heard it. There he's scrubbing the launch. Let's see if they have any commentary. But anyway, like I was saying, when Polly is detached from the vehicle, it was supposed to fire thrusters to turn it around 180 degrees and then fire its engines. Instead, it turned itself 360 degrees and fired its engines. Guess which way it went? 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. So that was the first launch. And of course, Polyus itself failed because it pretty much drove itself quite literally into the ground. Probably not even that far. And of course, the second one would be the well-known sideways. Yeah. And of course, the other one would have been was the sole and successful the sole and successful flight of the Buran shuttle, which was very much based on America's shuttle. The only difference is that all the engines are in the booster stack itself, and the only engines aboard Buran herself were just RCS and ohms thrusters. The idea behind that, though, was to basically have fully throttleable and fully shuttable downable, if that's even a word, engines on the entire entire booster
Mission
system.
Control. It is confirmed that we will not continue with the Amazon Project Kuiper 1 launch activities today. We will work with our partners at the U.S. Space Force Space Launch Delta 45 for the timing of our next launch opportunity. For up-to-date information, please visit us at ulalaunch.com. I'm Caleb Weiss, and for Britt Porcelli, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, let's go ahead and return to chatting for just a minute. I'm also going to make a change real quick over on YouTube to reflect the fact that the mission has been scrubbed. Oh well, they happen. Save that one. There we go. So now YouTube and Twitch are now both updated. Twitch was easy. YouTube, unfortunately, has this one management interface that's really annoying. Whereas with Twitch, it's very, very modular. And I actually have I use when I manage my streams, I use shit, what's it called? Oh, I'm trying to remember it. Oh yeah, Vivaldi as my browser, mainly because I can do one thing with Vivaldi that I cannot do with Chrome or even with WaterFox. I don't use Firefox anymore because of let's just say policy changes. But anyway, basically what I can do, instead of saying F11 and having it go complete full screen kiosk mode, I can just get rid of just the small interface bits, which are those elements which include where you put where you have a search bar, your URL bar, and stuff like that, and I put the big interfaces in the center, which I can then refer to if I need to. But unfortunately, I cannot do that with YouTube. Basically, on the ones on the sides, I basically take a center interface of Twitch's stream panel and basically break it in half, half of them sit in a gutter on one side, and the other half sit on a gutter on the other side of my main browser window. And then left side is where I see like activity logs and my chat. Although I actually have my chat popped out of the main window, which has everything, and put on my monitor to my right here, along with my YouTube chat from the management interface. And unfortunately, I had to go to the main window just to manage YouTube, because it's all unified in one interface, which I'm not terribly fond of, but what can you do? Let me see. I'm just wondering whom we might be able to check in with over on Twitch, or I may just end stream for now. I might actually do a stream a little later. I haven't decided what I want to do yet. Just a little bit of an announcement due to situation going on at work. All of us have gotten the next 2 days off. Basically, we don't have much in the way of work, so we are taking the next 2 days off, and I may likely stream over the course of those 2 days. And there's also been something I've been dealing with more on a more personal level, IRL, and that might affect my ability to stream. I'm debating whether or not to discuss it more in terms of posts in my social media or a video to that effect. But basically, not exactly been in the best of headspaces of late, and things sort of came to a head today, and those extra days off are going to probably help out enormously, if for no other reason, just for me to I don't know what's a good word, occupy myself maybe. So we'll see, more as I get it, and we'll see. And also, I am going to track the situation with this particular launch to see if there are any issues that need to be tracked. More information as it becomes available, and hopefully there'll be a rescheduled launch date, and hopefully on a day I can actually cover it. I also happen to get off a bit early because I really needed to start the ball rolling as far as dealing with my RL situation. So more on that as time passes, and as well as my comfort level as to how to discuss what's going on and what's going to be happening. I'm hoping it's not going to be huge or affect my ability to function in life. So, like I said, more on that as information presents itself. So, stay tuned. But in the meantime, let me do one quick thing real quick here. Oh, shoot. You know what? I forgot to do. One of the things I got to do is put model controls on the final screen of that I usually use on my Stream Deck or Sammy in order to make model stuff my model do things in advance of the end of the show. So I'm gonna need to go previous to that one. Whoops, I went a little too far in flight. But as always, I like to say, Slavu Kraini, we know who the real good guys are in this particular fight out there. So, and on top of that, I need to make a few other adjustments to my model as well, because I'm still messing with VBridger, trying to get, and on top of that, I'm also looking at other capture options, especially within VBridger, so I can, whether on the iPhone, mainly on the iPhone, webcam is probably going to be a no-go, mainly because of the way I would have to connect it to my main machine. So in any event, I'd like to say thank you so much for being with me, and hopefully everybody, hopefully I might stream a game later tonight. We'll see how I feel about it, and what my also need to get some dinner before too long too. So in any event, thank you so much for joining me, and too bad we couldn't launch, but hey, better a scrub than a boom, especially and anytime KF16. Thank you so much for coming by. Oh my gosh, did that actually happen? I need to double check, guys. I just updated. Let me go over to that machine here real quick, and let's see if I can manually complete the redeem. Ow! Nope, it's not capturing. I'll have to mess with it. So more on that as I I think I have to reset the capture on it too. So anyway, thanks Warhawk for coming in. I knew you were I kind of knew you were there the whole time, but in any event, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone else for being here, and thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end of this this stream, even though we did not launch today. So we'll see how things go in the next couple of hours, and see if I'm feeling up to streaming a game. So thanks so much for coming here, and I will see you again soon. And until then, bye.